What's up and good morning, War Report family. You got Ike Jones back with another morning drop. Today we are talking about year two expectations with Coach Hugh Freeze. What should Auburn fans expect? Y'all know how we do right here, War Report style. Let's drop it on them.
You are now listening to the War Report.
Morning drop. It is Monday, January the 29th. Hopefully everybody is doing all right. We are here with another morning drop talking to you guys about some Auburn football. Auburn women's basketball is in action tonight back in Neville Arena taking on the Georgia Bulldogs. So if you're in the Auburn area, make sure you go and check out that game. We're talking Auburn football today. Before we get into the conversation, make sure you're doing the necessary by sharing the video out there on social media. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. But the conversation this morning is about year two. We are just on the brink of getting started with spring and want to know, what should the expectations be in year two under Coach Hugh Freeze? Should Auburn fans expect a bump? A lot of fans think that year two is really going to be the year. I really think this is kind of year 1.2, like something like that. Like it's not fully a year two, because it's just because I think year one, Coach Hugh Freeze wasn't really in charge of the offense the way that he would have been in his previous stops and all that. But the expectations for year two, I think, are going to be a little bit different than they were for year one. But what should those expectations be, I think, is more of the question. And what has he done historically in year twos? And that's really what I want to look at this from a historical perspective and talking about what he's done in his past in year twos and what we should expect in year one now. When we get into some points of these, there's going to be some things that look very similar, and there's going to be some things that are very unsimilar. Dissimilar is the correct word for that, not unsimilar. That is not a real word, but it's okay. We're going to get it right. But some things that are very dissimilar. But let's start the comparison with year one versus year two with the thing I think that have Auburn fans the most excited, and that is recruiting. When we go back and we look at historically, and I'm just going to compare Ole Miss, Liberty, and Auburn in these scenarios as far as recruiting is concerned. Year one under Coach Hugh Freeze, Ole Miss was ranked number 46 in their recruiting class. That was in 2012. They were ranked 46 in the recruiting class. And Ole Miss is a program that just traditionally hasn't been great as far as tops of the league in recruiting. That hasn't changed just because Lane Kiffin's there now. He still can't recruit. But, it is going to be a thing where Auburn fans are super excited because, listen, Liberty year one was 133rd in recruiting, right? And so, Liberty, again, not a school that you're going to see a bunch of highly touted recruits going to. So you don't expect to see them high in the recruiting rankings. And, so what he did in his first year to year two, as far as the bump is concerned, that is something that Auburn fans should have expected, and they actually got, right? So you get to year two under Coach Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss, went from 46 to number 8 overall in the recruiting rankings in year 2023. Liberty got a bump from 133 up to number 88. So a big bump in recruiting in year one to year two under Coach Hugh Freeze should have been expected. Auburn went from 18th to 8th. Now, not as big a jump, right, because you started at a much higher place, but you still got into the top 10 in year one under Coach Hugh Freeze as it stands right now. So, of course, things could change as far as the recruiting rankings are concerned with National Signing Day coming up next week. It's been reported that Auburn's not going to sign Dimitri Nicholas, so it might be, a little different. I don't know what the rankings would be after that, or if they're going to pick up somebody else. But year one to year two, you did get the bump in the recruiting that you typically have seen with Coach Hugh Freeze after he gets his recruiting organization laid out, and then they go in and they figure out how they want to attack things. You get the bump in recruiting in all of those scenarios in his last 3 coaching stints, Ole Miss, Liberty, and now at Auburn. Then we get into what I think is the thing that Auburn fans really need to see in a year two bump, and that's with the offense. So this is why I say this is like year 1.0 or 2.0, whatever. It's not year two though. It's because the offense was not a Coach Hugh Freeze offense in year one. I mean, we're talking about an offense back in 2012 when passing offenses were just really becoming a thing. You had Bo Wallace at quarterback there, and he threw for almost 3,000 yards, right? And passing offenses have revolutionized around the country since then. 3,000 yards was like wow numbers back then for an SEC offense in 2012. And then in year two, he threw for 33-46, right? So you got a bump in what you saw in offensive production in your passing offense specifically in year two under Coach Hugh Freeze. I didn't get into the Liberty numbers too much, but Liberty also saw a significant bump in their ability to go out there and put up points per game, something I didn't talk about. Now, they didn't get a significant bump in points per game. They actually went down year one to year two points per game in Ole Miss from 31.5 down to 30. But, I mean, 1.5 points. That's pretty stable as far as your points produced. But you did get the offensive bump in year one to year two. You really got the offensive bump in year one specifically over, year over year between the year before he got there and year one when he got there. So Auburn fans, and this is the one I think Auburn fans really want to see, and this is one of the things that's very dissimilar right now. You didn't see success in the pass game year one with Coach Hugh Freeze here, and this is why I say this is kind of not a great comparison because he was the play caller year one at Ole Miss. He was the play caller year one at Liberty. He was the play caller year two at Ole Miss. He was the play caller year two at Liberty. That's not going to be the case at Auburn because he was not the play caller full-time last season. So we're really just getting to the place where we're going to see year one Coach Hugh Freeze offense and what it looks like. Again, traditionally that offense you're talking about close to 3,000 passing yards for a quarterback out there, and they're going out there and they're putting up points, 30 plus points per game. Can this year you see the true bump? What is year two of Coach Hugh Freeze? Can you get the offensive bump that you typically get in year one of Coach Hugh Freeze with him coaching his offense the way that he wants to coach it? Now, a lot of that's going to come back down to the question of quarterback. I get it. I understand that that's exactly where you are thinking when you start talking about all of this stuff, especially I'm talking about pass offense. And, listen, people like to bring up wide receivers. The wide receivers back at Ole Miss that in those days, I mean, listen, they had Laquan Treadwell, right, on that offense. But he wasn't even like the main receiver that year for Ole Miss in year one. So I think that, sometimes we put stuff on things that are kind of symptoms and not the problem. The problem with this offense last year, in my opinion, and we can dive more into the numbers about that, was more about situational play calling and execution on the part of a lot of people. It wasn't just, oh man, our wide receivers are terrible. Our wide receivers weren't great last year. The numbers bear that out, but I think it was more symptomatic of pass attempts, play calling, and execution from the offensive line and the quarterback that showed weak wide receiver numbers. But we will definitely dive into that because, again, the wide receivers deserve a lot of blame when it comes to what the passing offense looked like last year. But they don't shoulder that blame alone. But 1,700 yards, 17,000 would be breaking every record ever imaginable. 1,700 passing yards is not going to be it, or it's not going to get to cut it in year two. You're going to need to figure out how to get almost double that production to get back to a place where you're used to seeing an offense be under Coach Hugh Freeze, like at least a 1,000-yard jump in year two under Coach Hugh Freeze to get back to that place. And that's going to be a daunting task. How does he get back to an offense that he's used to, which is throwing for close to 3,000 yards when you were almost 300 yards as far as one particular starting quarterback away from 2,000. A 1,000-yard plus bump in one season is going to be a significant one. So looking forward to seeing what Coach Hugh Freeze is able to do from an offensive standpoint. But you do get that bump typically in Coach Hugh Freeze's first season and going into the second season as well. But the main one, and I want to camp out here for a second, is what are you going to see as far as the record is concerned? Coach Hugh Freeze in year one at Ole Miss was 7-6. with a win in a bowl game. Year 2 was 8-5 with a win in a bowl game. It's only a 1-game difference as far as year 1 to year 2. Now, Liberty, you saw a 2-game win difference. You went from 8-5 to 10-1. Which of those two things can you expect to see at Auburn? Is Auburn so far behind? Because listen, like, again, we got to think about Ole Miss and where they were, right? Like, they were a bottom of the SEC West team when he came in. Year 1, they finished 5th in the SEC. Year 1, Auburn finished 5th in the SEC. The gap between Ole Miss and the top of the conference was, I think, wider at the time than what it was between Auburn and the top of the conference when he got here. What should the expectations be from a record standpoint in year 2, considering he's much further behind in the offensive production from year 1? Now, recruiting, right on schedule. Offense production, way behind schedule as far as what he has been traditionally. So how is it going to play out on the field, wins and losses? Because I just told you that the gap between where he usually is and where he is right now in his offensive production in year 1, we're talking about, again, like 1,200 yards of difference of year 1 production from the main passer in your offense. How can we bridge that gap and get to a place where the offensive numbers look more akin to what you're accustomed to seeing from a year 1 Hugh Freeze? And if we're really just in that place, year 1 Hugh Freeze, because, listen, you got the bump to number 8 in recruiting classes. You didn't see that play out on the field as far as wins and losses really until year 4 of Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss. Year 3, you still just saw incremental increases. You went from 7 wins to 8 wins to 9 wins. And then year 4, you went to 10. So you was just steadily building over those 4 seasons. Is Coach Hugh Freeze going to get that level of patience from Auburn fans to be able to be a steady increase in the wins? I think that has to do with what the wins are and which losses there are and all that sort of thing, and what the recruiting does, because, listen, recruiting actually went backwards in year 3 at Ole Miss. Now, there's a lot of external reasons, but did the same thing at Liberty. You got the bump in year 2, and then it fell backwards in year 3. Can he retain the momentum in recruiting going into year 3? But can you get that offense looking better in year 2 to make it look more like what you're accustomed to? And I think the lane is open now for him more than ever with the landscape of what's happening. There are a lot of great coaches in this conference, but Coach Hugh Freeze, I think, is starting to get his staff together. We still got a staff position that needs to get filled out, but he started to get his staff together, and he's starting to build the kind of organization that he's accustomed to. How is that going to translate to offense and record so that Auburn fans have a product that they can go out there and support wholeheartedly and understand it's going to be something that they can be proud of? And Auburn players can start to see that they're putting the kind of product together that they had been recruited on throughout the process, so that that Auburn can continue the momentum. Yet to be seen what it is, but what I want to know is, what do you all expect in year 2 as far as passing numbers, and then as far as how that translates to a record on the field as of today? There's a lot of unanswered questions. We didn't even talk about defense, of course, because that's going to factor into your record, right? Like, you can't just score points. You have to be able to go out there and stop some people as well. But as far as the offense is concerned, do you expect to see that bump in year 2? Definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. Before we get into your thoughts on all of those things, of course, as always, we got to stop and acknowledge the sponsor of today's War Rapport Morning Drop, and that is our guys over at MANSCAPED. MANSCAPED is back, giving you all the great, I don't even know what I was going to say something probably goofy right there, but it's Valentine's season, and roses are red, violets are blue. Trim your balls, and your date will thank us too. Valentine's Day is knocking, and Manscaped is the remedy for what the love doctor ordered. His prescription, the all-new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, designed to elevate your grooming game and shine like the heartthrob you are. Join 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped in our exclusive offer by going to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping when you use code RAPPORT. And for the bearded kings like myself, Manscaped brings you the Beard Hedger Pro Kit Designed to shave your scruff effortlessly. It sculpts the cheeks, shines, and maintains the beard styles, giving you that suave look for your romantic moments. Again, get 20% off and free shipping when you use code RAPPORT at Manscaped. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using code RAPPORT, because your grooming upgrade awakes, ready to charm your Valentine's dates. I love the poetry that they always give me with these Manscaped reads, man. It's beautiful. All right, let's get over into the comment section and see what my Green Name gang is talking about this morning. Appreciate you guys for jumping in here early on a Monday morning to talk a little Auburn football. Let's see. Jonathan Boyson jumps in and says, 2025 class is off to a good start. I'm glad we haven't seen any decommits from the 25 class with Zach and Caddy and T. Reed leaving. It's definitely too early to talk about whether or not somebody's going to decommit. I don't think anybody would just immediately jump out there and decommit this early from the 25 class. So I guess that is a good sign that they weren't so connected to those guys. We haven't seen a lot of commits that I think were directly tied to them because, first and foremost, T. Reed wasn't out there on the road, so he wouldn't have been the lead recruiter for anybody in this class. He might have been helping close the deal, but he wasn't the lead recruiter. Now, with Caddy, we hadn't gotten a running back recruit in this class that had committed yet. There has, been some rumblings for some running backs, but nobody has committed yet. So that wouldn't really play out in that way because he wouldn't have been the lead recruiter on anybody besides a running back for the most part. Now, the one would have been Zach, right? Zach Etheridge definitely may be responsible for some decommitments out there because he would have been lead recruiter on some guys out there. But I do think that the staff that Coach Hugh Freeze has brought in is adept enough in recruiting that they can be able to make up for that missing piece. In the sum of the parts would be able to make up for it. So looking forward to seeing that. Let's see. Chris S. says he's not starting from behind in the 25 class. We're top 7 now with a bunch of D-line talent. Moderate on the field success should keep us top 10. I would certainly hope so. Again, I talked about year 3. They went up to year 2. Now this is again Ole Miss, so to keep the momentum there is a little bit more difficult, and where they started from was, so being number 15 overall in that year 3 there for Ole Miss is still a high recruiting ranking for that school. But he started at 18 here in year 1 up to 8. And now the question is whether or not he can continue the path towards a top 5 ranking, which is where they were headed towards had they landed a couple more people in this class, or are we going to be able to at least maintain in the top 10? Yet to be seen, but definitely hope so. Jonathan Boyson jumps back in. So, Ike, should we expect a big bump this year in the pass offense since this is his first year calling plays? That is my expectation. My expectation is that we see at least an additional 800 passing yards this season. That's a lot. That sounds like a huge number, 800. I just think you're going to throw the ball more. You should not have the excuse that you don't have the wide receiver talent. Everybody's super. I get it, they're young, but they're talented. So talent's not going to be the issue. A lot of these guys are here in the spring. You've got some returning guys that are good for your wide receiver room. Get the quarterback right. You should see a big bump in the offense. No excuses year 2, Coach Hugh Freeze. The offense needs to look like a Coach Hugh Freeze offense, and typically that offense is closer to 3,000 passing yards. I expect to see at least 800 additional passing yards for an offense. For a quarterback that threw in the range of 1,800, he needs to be throwing closer to 2,600 next season, in my opinion. That's what I expect to see. We'll see how that plays out on the field. Chris S. says, I don't see the offense being above average with Thorny Boy. Cam Coleman needs to be our Keon in year 1 for an upgrade. I don't know that Cam Coleman has to be Keon Coleman, but he definitely needs to be able to provide a security blanket for Thorne to be able to, or whomever the quarterback is, but let's just roll with Peyton Thorne as the guy. Listen, Peyton Thorne's thrown for this much in his career before, right? So there's no reason why he couldn't do it again in an offense that he's more familiar in, and he's got a second year to be able to understand. He's got some better talent on the outside by everybody's account as far as star rating. Like, there's no reason why it couldn't happen. The offensive line, I don't expect to take a significant step back, even though you're going to be playing and rotating in some newer guys in that line. I think you've done good enough in the recruiting and with guys that you have in the stable there already to be able to have some good continuity along your offensive line. There's no reason why it shouldn't improve in year two, even if Peyton Thorne is the quarterback and people's doubts about him. He's done it before in his career. There's no reason he can't do it again. Last year needs to be a blip on the radar as far as Peyton Thorne is concerned, because even his step back second year at Michigan State, where they lost a lot of, like, this year is the opposite, right? By everybody's accounts, this year more targets and talent should be there in the receiving core, and he should be able to have an additional year of study in this system and it should be better results. It should be, I expect year two Peyton Thorne, Hugh Freeze, if that's the combination that's going to be, to look more like year two Michigan State as far as passing numbers for Peyton Thorne, less like year one Auburn numbers. If we get into year one Michigan State numbers, then we're talking about a whole other universe of stuff. And, we're having a different conversation about what the potential of this team could be. But I expect at least year two Michigan State numbers from this offense. Let's see. Chris S. jumps back in and says, I want 8+ a bowl victory to roll us into 9 wins in year two. Be nice to see. Definitely be nice to see. We'll get more into the schedule as we get some things going out this week. I want to say right now, again, I'm going to firmly disagree with the ceiling that Mike G has put out there of 7 wins. I am not in that place of that's being the ceiling of Auburn. But I do think that getting to a place where you can get 8 wins and a bowl victory would be a good year two. Again, I don't need to see us go undefeated and compete for a college football playoff in year two based upon where you were in year one. I thought that college football playoff in year two was potentially a possibility before I saw year one results on the field. I think you put yourself behind that expectation with the way that year one played out as far as the turnover with staff, as far as how little Coach Hugh Freeze was actually involved in the offense. I think you're behind the 8 ball in terms of that. You probably should have gotten to 7 to 8 wins this year, and then you'd be in the place where 9 to 10 wins was a possibility in year two, looking at potentially getting to the college football playoff. I don't think that that's the case right now. Got to see a lot more before I'm ready to jump out there. Jed says, with this schedule, 8-4 shouldn't be hard to do. I can also see a world where he picks up 9+, but that means they really got it together. I agree. I agree with this that, well, I won't say that 8 wins shouldn't be hard to do. I'll say this, 8 wins was achievable in year one, so there's no reason why 8 wins could be impossible in year two. But easy to do makes it seem like that's more of your relative floor. And I think that the floor is still probably around 6 to 7 wins this season. I don't know. We've got it's too early for me to be forecasting floor ceiling stuff because there's so much stuff that hasn't been ironed out that determines that kind of thing. But I will say that my expectation, just based upon what historically has happened with Coach Hugh Freeze and his teams, is at least 1 to 2 additional wins in this season, which will put you in 7 to 8 wins as your floor. Chris S. jumps back in and says, we need a nose tackle, and it sucks a little more not to have Dimitri in this class. Agreed. I think that, that's got to be a high priority for the transfer portal if we're not going to find somebody. I would have liked to get both, and I don't know where we are on scholarship numbers, so that's going to determine a lot of those things. But I would have liked to get a nose tackle out of high school and somebody in the transfer portal. Maybe you can go get someone with multiple years of eligibility that can play the nose out of the transfer portal, and that'll be a good situation for this team. But you definitely need more interior linemen that will be able to hold down the zero technique for this coming season. P. Pass says, I see no logical reason not to go undefeated at home this year. Can Auburn go out to Athens and finish the job versus Georgia this year? UGA will be top 3 again. Undefeated at home. That's going to be tough. right? I mean, I think the tough portion of that specifically is going to be the Oklahoma game, right? Like that's going to be your tough home game that you're going to have to figure out how to get the win. The rest of those games are winnable games at home. Not that Oklahoma's not winnable. It's just that when, if I'm doing my boss toss loss way too early, Oklahoma's going to be in that toss situation right now before I see what Oklahoma's trotting into this season with and see what Auburn is looking like after the spring. And we figure out what that second transfer portal looks like as far as attrition plus additions to the team. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, beating Georgia in Athens has not been a winning proposition for Auburn of recent, and Georgia has shown no signs of relent as far as the talent that they're putting out there on the field. Kirby Smart's as good as ever, so it's going to be a difficult thing to do, and Auburn just hasn't really played well on the road versus Georgia of recent. But we'll see. We shall definitely see what happens. You're going into year 2 of Carson Beck, and he should be better in that system. So a lot of things not in Auburn's favor in terms of that matchup. But again, I think Auburn is the wild card in here because you just don't know what they're going to actually look like as far as that offense is concerned. Jonathan Boyson jumps in and says, the Bammers would melt down if we beat them the first year Saban retired. I don't think they would, honestly. I think that they would make all the excuses in the world while, oh, well, y'all just caught us in year 1. It's not going to be a meltdown for them. I'll say this on the other side, though. If Auburn doesn't win the Iron Bowl this year, and we haven't gotten into this hypothetical scenario, but if Auburn does not win the Iron Bowl this year, despite it being on the road, all that Kalen DeBoer in his first season, I don't think Auburn can lose the Iron Bowl this season, guys. I don't think it can happen. That his hot seat. Listen, the only way Auburn fans will be okay, and I mean okay, not I'm talking about like not ready to push him directly and the minivan down the road out the door at Auburn with losing the Iron Bowl is if it's a 10-win season already. I don't think Coach Hugh Freeze can go into this season winning 8 games or finish next season winning 8 games and one of those losses be the Iron Bowl. And Auburn fans feel good about that year. I just don't think so, right? Like it's got to be a 10-win season, in my opinion. That feels unforgivable in the minds of the Auburn brass and fan base to lose to a first-year head coach in the Iron Bowl. Just doesn't feel like something people are going to want to see happen. Jonathan Boyson says, Ike, I see OU, but they lost their QB and pretty much their entire offensive line. Again, I don't know anything about them. I do know that they are starting a new quarterback in that bowl game, and I don't know what they've done in the transfer portal. I don't know what their defense is looking like. I have not delved into our opponents for next year enough to be able to give you guys any sort of real take about next season, which is why I think it's way too early to start doing predictions about what I think the relative floor and ceiling for the team is, because there's just so much that's going to be changing between now and then. And there's so little research I've actually done on any of these other teams to give you guys anything that makes a lot of sense. Ant Robinson says that he thinks that we go 10-2, upset Bama, losses to Puppy Dogs, and maybe Mizzou or Oklahoma. So this is an interesting take. Would an Auburn win over Bama be an upset right now? I don't know. I mean, Bama's going to come in ranked highly because they're Alabama, but is that going to be an upset right now, or are people expecting for Auburn to win this? And again, there's a long way. We're talking about a long way to the season starting. There's an eternity of time between now and when that Iron Bowl happens for those two teams to shape the direction of what the programs are going to be. It's going to be very interesting to see how the landscape changes in the conference now that Bama has a new reality of who their head coach is going to be. So we'll see what happens as the season progresses. But yeah, I would say today people would say that'd be an upset because of where those programs are relative to one another. But will year 1 look like a rebuild? Will it look like a, status quo year for them? I don't know what it's going to look like in year one, but it will be super interesting to see how things look once we get to the end of next season, where that Iron Bowl sits. So it's going to be a lot of rumblings going around if we can't figure out how to get that dub, though. Jed says, I agree. He cannot lose the Iron Bowl regardless of it being in Tuscaloosa. Auburn's got to win that game this year, on top of the fact that it's been 4 years since Auburn beat Alabama. Yeah, listen, I think you got to get that dub this year, man. Again, I think the only way that fans stomach that is a 10-win season. Like, you've already won 10 going into that game, and you're looking at trying to win. I can't envision a lot of, maybe if you beat Georgia before that, you get the upset against Georgia, they'll be able. I don't know, man. Like, there's a lot of scenarios that maybe it feels, but I just can't. I can't see losing to a year one coach in the Iron Bowl, regardless of what the circumstances of being on the road are. I just can't see that being a thing that Auburn fans look at and say to themselves that they're happy with that outcome, unless within that outcome you're talking about college football playoff contention as a team. I don't know. So we will see what happens as far as all of that is concerned. All right. I appreciate you guys jumping in here with me with the Morning Drop. As always, the Morning Drop is brought to you by show sponsor Rogue Shop. Head over to rogueshop.com and use code RAPPORT when you do. Get you a little something off your purchase. Rogue Shop is America's #1 online dispensary with sleep, stress, pain, anxiety relief. Rogue Shop's got you covered, so you can head over there and make sure you let them know the War Report since you're using code RAPPORT. I'll be back at you guys tomorrow morning with another Morning Drop. Members, make sure you have your notifications on. We're going to get into some film this week. Like the video before you get out of here. Subscribe to the channel. And as always, until the next time, War Eagle.